right, everyone. Welcome, top of the morning. We have an awesome podcast today with Robert Trout, founder of Experiential Healing Institute. We're so excited to have you on. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. So we chatted before. You have so many years in this field. We're so excited to have you and just geek out about wilderness therapy, talk about your experience. And, I would love for families and wilderness alumni to kind of hear your story. So I kind of just want to start this off by asking you, how did you get into wilderness therapy?
Well, my story starts when I was a teenager because I was a wilderness therapy student. I didn't know it, and this was a long time ago. So programs have adapted and changed their models a lot since I was in. But I went to kind of an experimental therapeutic program in Colorado that, to be perfectly honest with you, saved my life.
Yeah. Wow.
And it changed my life and really in a lot of ways set me on the direction of my education, my development as a person, throughout my personal process throughout my life, and ultimately led to me working through wilderness programs for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I worked for 9 different wilderness programs over my career, starting as a field guide, working through management, into program development, all the way into becoming a wilderness therapist. And then throughout my career, working with residential programs, starting a residential program, and ultimately working with the Experiential Healing Institute, which is my longest running support program for families, and is really kind of the culmination of me starting as a wilderness student and taking that experience of being a student, being in programs, and then being home and kind of seeing what was lacking there helped me really set up what we do now.
Wow. 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 So much experience. This is going to be a fun podcast. So, okay, let's rewind and maybe you can try to start thinking about what it was like when you were, in a group in the backcountry. Maybe it was a new skill set for you. I don't know if you had a background of recreation at that time when you were doing it. What was that like? Just getting out in the backcountry, being with this group. Tell us what that was like, if you can remember.
Oh, I remember all of it. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, when I say like it was transformative, it was the experience that woke me up to the reality of how I wanted to live, who I was as a person. Like as a teenager, it was the pivotal moment for me that made life worth living in a lot of respects. So when I
Wow.
think back on it, to answer your part of your question, I was a country boy, so I was very familiar with the outdoors and woods and
Yeah.
things like that. But we didn't really camp for recreation as a family and that kind of work till much later in my life. So when I was like, "Oh, why don't you go camping in Colorado?" and that's how they got me there.
Right.
Oh yeah, that sounds fun. Let's go camping.
Right.
So I was slightly tricked the first time I got there because I was like, this seems really structured and like, interesting. And it took me actually a while to even realize what was happening because the program did a masterful job of hiding the therapeutic
Right.
element, and it was so skills based that we all of us, and I remember and still talk to others that were there, we really delved into like, oh, that's a really cool skill, building that fire, that's a really cool skill, reading maps and compasses, and peaking a 14,000 foot mountain, and like
Yeah.
all these experiential, really adventure centered things. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, climbing Mount Galena. I'll never forget that name. 2 o'clock in the morning, because what a great idea. Let's hike through the night to get to the top
Right.
for sunrise. I had no idea. I
Right.
just, again, they did a masterful job of hiding the therapeutic. But, 2 o'clock in the morning, the therapist who was with us the entire time just happened to want to circle us up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do a group,
Right.
that kind of stuff. So I'm going to say that through my experience, I grew up country. That really reset the tone for me around there's country and then there's wilderness. There's this
Mm,
advanced, adventurous element that the woods provides a space for you to really just hone in on yourself, your skill sets, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. It brings up challenge and conflict and all these elements that allow
yeah.
you to really stop and have the space to look at it and say, "Oh, wow, that's quite amazing." So I started with that experience, and then again that transformed my life into everything about life was easier because there was nothing that could possibly be harder than
Yeah.
climbing that mountain at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Right? It
Right.
it just completely reset my mind, my perspective on, working on this class project in high school is nothing compared to trying to cook a meal in a windstorm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's like a badge of honor, and only you know what you've done, right?
That's
And
right.
doing those tough things, you really prove to yourself what you are capable of. And also just the interpersonal connections. Because I mean, there's so many connections. You're making a connection with the environment, connections with yourself, but then also connections with others. And that's what I think the outdoors is so amazing in wilderness, because some of those skills you learn, like communication skills, they're foundational.
They are.
They're foundational in leadership. And that's what I love is a lot of the outdoor leadership settings. Because if you're the leader of the group, you have to deal with all that conflict. As you mentioned conflict. And so, you know, at that age, I think you learn about the nuances and the complexities with navigating certain emotions of folks, and that will show up in work settings in the future, or wherever you end up. um,
Yes.
was that something that you learned a lot in wilderness, like leadership and
So my story literally started with my first wilderness program because then the very next year, the first time I went, it saved my life. The second time I went, I asked to go because I knew that my life had been saved, but I didn't really know what to do with it, if that makes
yeah,
sense. Like,
yeah, no,
again,
totally,
teenage years, very transformative, very like interpersonal. I knew I wanted something, but I didn't know what. So I had to go back a second time at my own request, to have that experience where it's like, I don't need you guys to save my life anymore. I need you to take me deeper. So,
mm,
doing the solo in the woods alone, building fire, like doing all these different elements of interpersonal work for the first time, and having the staff and who had the capacity to really know how to facilitate that. Then
interesting.
then to take the story, if you want all the details, sure, because
Yeah,
then
let's have
the
some fun, a
next
few if you
year,
don't mind.
the next year I turned 18.
Wow.
And so the third
In the backcountry, is your
no, no,
birthday
no.
in the
But I was 18. I was getting ready. I was graduating high school. All that. I went back a third time as a mentor. So I was literally
okay,
pushing myself into the leadership roles. And the third time, I got to see the man behind the curtain. I got to see the planning of how to get this one kid that he's ready to crack. He's ready to open, but he needs that push. And I got to
yeah,
be in that staff team as they were discussing the strategies to safely build the container to make that happen. So I got
wow.
to see the game being played and to learn from people who were really doing masterful work.
Wow.
And that, I mean, like I said, my experience over those years of finishing high school and just being happy, and getting
Yeah.
ready for college, like that was the element for me where it's like, okay, I want this. I want this. And so I should clarify, I was 18, 19, right in that age gap. I had completed my first semester of college. I had graduated, gone to college, and then gone back as the mentor to the wilderness program, and they let me do that. I requested, and they loved me and loved the work that I did, and they wanted that energy in the group. So I went back and did that. And part of that third year was that I was quitting college. It's like I was a geology
Wow.
major. I hated it. I was like, for me, I was really struggling with like, I don't think college is for me. But in that third year, being a mentor, I had this revelation when I was in the woods with this team, watching them and learning, and I was asking them about their lives, and I found out that they had college degrees to do this. So what I realized was I do want to be a college student, but I don't want to do something just to do it. I want it to have meaning. So
Yeah.
every time I went, it saved my life or directed my life in a different way. And so I went in to get a bachelor's degree in outdoor recreation and recreational management, which
Right on. Right on.
set me up to do all kinds of careers after that, but ultimately led me back into the industry of working in wilderness therapy, which is and has been my heart and soul since I was a teenager.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, it's so sticky, and once you see the magic, you're kind of pulled into it. And
Yes.
that was my story as well. I did an outdoor leadership program. I got in the wilderness, got back, went back to school, you know, adventure education,
Yep.
and this stuff is special, and it takes a certain person to do that. And like you said, it's you can't just sit at a desk job. When you see that magic, you want to be a part of something special. That's like you said, meaningful. You can't go back. You just can't.
Yep.
And yeah, and I think like wherever you are at in life, that's why wilderness is so amazing. Because I think as a guide, right, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of hats you wear, but you know, you hold space and you're a mirror to that process of change, right? Those stages of change, and it's a great place to navigate that, right? And so leading into my next question is, you know, why do you think wilderness is so special?
So we get into this with most of our families that we work with at the Experiential Healing Institute around the meaning of wilderness. And I'm going to say that what comes up for me when you ask that question is that there's two different elements. One is families that are in a desperate situation, they're really hopeful that wilderness is going to fix whatever's going on. And we're very
Mm,
careful around that because that's not true. Wilderness doesn't fix the individual that's going there, it doesn't
right,
change the dynamic of life, it doesn't do that. Wilderness is an intervention. So when you say what's the magic, the other side of that coin is that families have to understand that this is an opportunity for change. So the magic of wilderness is that for me, the individual, especially the individual who's there, whether it's a child or a young adult or whatever they are, when they're out there, it's an opportunity for a life altering experience to be had. And it's really a choice for them to make along the way. And for a lot of students, they don't make that choice for weeks. Like they need those weeks
right,
to break down and to hopefully have really good staff facilitating a process, a transition for them, allowing them to realize I do want to be different. I do want to change. I do want to do this. So the reflective practices in wilderness really set the tone and the space for every individual that's out there to really buy in to their whole being, to their life and their experience. I'm going to say that the most challenging students that I ever worked with were the ones that they just didn't get it. They thought we were making them buy into what we were doing. And it's like, no, this isn't
yeah,
about us. It's really not about
right,
us. Like, this is your chance to wake up to your reality. So that reflective principle is the most powerful for the individual, but I'm also going to say for the family, and this is families we work in with, is if your kid is going to wilderness and they're in there, this is your chance on the outside to do a lot of work when they're not there.
yeah,
So take that breath. You need that breath, and they might be coming home in 12 weeks. Like you have 12 weeks, and it's a countdown for you
mm,
headed towards this moment. Now that's also magical, because very often the parents are exhausted, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever's involved, um, they are exhausted in it, and they have now given themselves space. And the trap is, oh, everything's going to be better now. So they become complacent in that. So the magic of wilderness is again, it's there for them to grab too. We have time and space and capacity to do this now, but do they do it? Who's facilitating that is how we actually got started.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. This is so good. Yeah, and I think a lot of a lot of fans perhaps have a perspective that when they send their kid that they're going to come back a new person, right? And um, no, it's not exactly the case, right? You're
No.
you're you're starting, like you said, you're starting change. You're putting a container and giving an opportunity to foster and cultivate introspection and reflection, and to look and see what's showing up in your life, what's working, what's not working, and ultimately make it about you, right? And
Yes.
kind of coming away from that parent-child power struggle, right? Uh, the, the family and the person who's in wilderness can do their own work and have that reset and that kind of reboot to, you know, take themselves out of that environment and connect with others who are kind of going through a similar process and sharing that experience. And that's kind of what I think is another part of wilderness that's special is the community. And that's kind of why I want to start this support community for wilderness alum, because it's not something you can relate with everyone
Yeah.
being out in the country and having these big breakthroughs and challenges too. And I think like what's so cool is about that community is it is a safe support um, structure for them. You
Yeah.
know, there's like that perceived risk you learn in venture education or outdoor education or a lot of wilderness schools. You're using that as a modality to, you know, in some way have an exposure therapy to show folks what they can do, what they're capable of. And, you know, when you have a group rallying behind you, it makes it a lot more fun. And, you know, you just do it little by little and you come back to the group with something. I think like with that rites of passage, that's something that in some ways is lost, I think, in our culture. And it maybe takes shapes in different ways, but really bringing something back to your tribe, to your family, for you, to your group, that's a powerful experience. Not everyone gets an opportunity to do that, you know, to see who they are with a group of people in the woods, right?
Yes. And that's part of the element is, at least for my personal experience, and then the work I've done with hundreds and hundreds of families at this point. For the kid, very often one of the core lessons is, oh, I'm not the only one struggling. You know, they, when they're out with people who are going through similar experiences, it offers that foundation of a container where it's like, oh, I'm not the only depressed teenager. Who would have
Right.
thought? Because for them, they often feel alone. But when you put them in a group of people, they start making friends with people who, hopefully, are in a position of sharing. Where it's like, yeah, no, we're all struggling. Let's admit to the struggle and not fake the this capacity that, oh, life's supposed to be all Facebook, right? The whole Facebook thing is like, oh, everyone's life
The
so
highlight reel.
perfect, and it's like, no, they were crying before they took that photo.
I know. I know. It's such a lie. Oh my
Oh, it's
gosh.
all a
Don't get me
lie.
started. Yeah, that's so true. So, okay, folks are transitioning back now from wilderness. Sometimes they might go to a residential treatment center, a transitional living program, or maybe families can't afford to continue having services after and they come home.
Yep.
What are some of the challenges you've seen in your experience and your expertise that folks are having when they come out of wilderness?
So, okay, this is a leading question, I'm sure, just because that's how we got started. The Experiential Healing Institute got started out of complete frustration, and yes, it was my frustration. I I was working as a wilderness therapist. I had a surprise graduation aligned for one of my students, and her father was coming into the group. I was hiking him into the group, and I stopped him like 100 yards from camp and looked at
Whoa.
him and said, okay, so we know neurologically that you're going to walk around the corner. She's going to see you, and the first reaction that she's going to have is she's going to be angry because you're the trigger. Like, can we just acknowledge that dad's the trigger, and we're working on that, but like, you're the trigger. And I looked at this father and said, I need to know that you're going to hold space for that and help de-escalate her and just allow her to come around that neurological trigger to get to the place that you can then be in relationship and celebrate and to honor each other. And this dad held up his hands, took a step back from me, and said, I read the books, but I don't know how to do it.
Okay, I see
Boom.
where you're going with this. I'm
That
excited.
that was it. That was it. That was the moment that for me professionally, I went, I'm done. I'm done spending hundreds of hours a year training hundreds of guides to work in this program to be able to do interventions, use neurological tricks, step in to build treatment plans that are emotionally and relationship based, like to build relationship and rapport, all these things that are like master level skills that we need our staff to have in order to be a transformative life experience. And I was
Wow.
like, I'm done. I'm done teaching them. And I literally went out. I'll never forget it because I left the field that day after that graduation, and I called a consultant that was I really loved working with her. She was amazing. I was like, hey, I have a question for you. Hypothetically, just hypothetically, if
Yeah.
I started flying anywhere in the world to go train parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, caregivers, if I went into the home to train them to be me, to be the master field guides that we have,
Yeah.
and to construct this, do you think anybody would hire me? I had my first client by the end of the week. And to be honest, I didn't have a
Oh,
business set up. I didn't have any. And this might be a little, shame story in there, but I was like, I was surprised by this idea catching fire because they literally mailed me a check. I went to the bank, opened a business account because I didn't have one, cashed the check, and bought a laptop to start the company. And
that's so awesome.
within 6 months, I was so full. I was hiring a team and training them, and we were flying all over the world training parents to do this. So when you ask about the transition home, my feeling of that is what's missing is that our families coming, especially families coming straight out of wilderness. Now, every wilderness program is different, okay?
Sure. Sure.
And I have to honor that because some of them do a really great job of training their staff. They have parenting programs. They do
Right.
all of this work. So I'm not putting anyone down in this. What
Totally.
I want to say, though, is that a lot of parents go through an experience over the course of 12 weeks, which is not very long. And the
Mm,
kid is going through an intensive built process every single day, and the family usually has
that's
1
true.
hour of therapy, 1 hour of maybe parent coaching. A lot of them don't.
Right.
And sometimes they're writing letters and doing things, but some weeks
Right.
there's no
Or some
homework.
support groups, but never the
There,
hands-on training.
there's nothing there. So when we look at the intensity,
Wow.
the family's not really meeting
It's not
the
matched.
process here until we get hired, where we go in and those families are doing calls, they're doing intensive trainings in person, they're doing homework assignments, we're helping them build their home plan, we're doing all this stuff in these weeks that we have, and sometimes that's 2 weeks. They don't get to us till the end of their process, but when we have them, we're able to train them and get them ready to meet that experience. And that's what's missing for most parents is they're like, oh, we did great therapy. We learned I feel statements, which blows my mind because I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm glad you learned I feel statements, but you think that's going to save your family dynamic?
Right.
No, it's
It's
not. Your
more
kids
more
still
to
your
more to than
kids
that.
still going to come home, and it's kind of this thing. When you think of wilderness, one of the metaphors I use with the families I trained beforehand, if they get to us for prevention work where they might use wilderness, but they're also trying to prevent it, that family, we say to them, okay, if I take you and I take you out of this house and plop you on an island for 12 weeks, you're going to live differently than you are at home, right? And they're like, absolutely. We're going to have to find food and make fire and work together and do all this kind. I'm like, yeah, because it's not your home. There's no oven, no microwave, no like, there's no conveniences. You don't have to go to work, like all these things. So if I take you and put you on that island, you're probably going to survive for 12 weeks, right? And they're like, yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. Now I take you off that island that you've survived on for 12 weeks and gone through an intense experience, and you're very proud of yourself and you've done great. And then I plop you right back in this living room where I'm standing with you, right back, and say, tomorrow you're going to go to work for 8 hours. You're going to come
Wow.
home and make dinner.
Hmm.
You're going to help your kids with their homework. You're going to um, walk the dog. You're going to do all the things that you have to do every day because that's how you neurologically designed your life for survival. It's the same thing. It's designing your life for survival. That's what we all do. Without thinking of it, we all do it. So I put you on that island, you're going to survive because your brain goes, oh, here's what I have to do to design my life for survival. Drop you into this house in upstate or in Manhattan. Your brain goes, here's what I have to do in a house in Manhattan to survive. Your brain's operating that way. So I take your kid who's been in wilderness for 12 weeks and drop them in this living room and go, tomorrow you're going to school,
Right.
and you're going to have your therapist appointment on Thursday, and you have to be nice to your brother. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to neurologically go from I am surviving and thriving and have new friends and I know how to
Right.
communicate and work through conflict. And then they're going to go, oh, I know how to survive here too. I refuse to get out of bed to go to school. I steal your money. I sneak out at night to my secret boyfriend or girlfriend. I, fight dad every day to relieve stress. So it's not that they're coming home and things are fixed or different. That's not what we have. But what we do have is someone who is programmed neurologically to know that there's a different way of doing this.
Right. They have more
So
awareness. They have way more introspection.
that's right. So our work for prevention work when the program or when the kid's at wilderness or a kid coming home from residential is quite similar at all three phases. Train the family, change how you're living and surviving at home, build the container so that things are different. Communication is different. Your interactions are different. The process is different so that when this kid comes home from wilderness or residential, it really doesn't matter, and they plop in that living room, you don't sit there in the same shirt you wear every single day to go to work and say, okay, you're going to school for the next 5 days and you can't get in trouble. No, you're coming home and you're going to wear a clown outfit with a clown nose to breakfast and say, good morning. How are you? What are you most excited about today if nothing else happens?
Right.
So taking the principles of wilderness and intervention and bringing it home and changing the whole family dynamic. You have to do that. If you want the kid to be different, you have to be different. The home has to be different. And that's a big part of our work. So for our work, we do beginning work or prevention work, meaning families that they're not quite ready or don't have the finances or they're really worried about some interpersonal dynamics about sending their kid away for wilderness. We're
Yeah.
doing the prevention work and trying to establish and build a home program for them. If the kid's at wilderness, we're helping families go through that where they're changing more rapidly, just like the kid is, and their process is in sync, or the kids coming home from a program and the family just needs that, like, make us different. There needs to be accountability, so you're accountable to us. We're supervising the development of a new lifestyle for all of you, because if you're the same, your kid will be the same 100%.
Wow. Yeah. Nothing changes if nothing changes, right? That's,
That's right.
yeah. So all encompassing, both sides, all ends,
Yep.
from start to finish. If they're considering doing wilderness or before, after, during, and specific on training and like really getting boots on the ground and helping them,
Yes.
hand holding and really making sure they become, like you said, that master field guide. And I love that because in my own life, all those years as I was field guiding, I learned like to just make my own relationships and interactions much better, more effective.
Yes.
Like the quality just got way better, and just honoring people and holding space, and not having kind of this maybe emotional fusion or reactivity, and
Yeah.
recognizing like, hey, I have emotional autonomy and they're upset, but I can hold space for that and recognize what they're feeling, and not getting sucked into that, right? That power struggle, learning how to de-escalate, learning how to communicate with nonviolent communication, and there's just so much more. And it's amazing because I've learned all that in wilderness, and it's
Yes.
all the books I've read that a lot of students have to read, and I really see where you're going with this, and I love that about your program and your approach. So we're kind of getting to the end of this, Robert. It's been amazing. Experiential Healing Institute. Is there anything else you want families to know about your services or how to get in contact with you?
So our website is theehi.org. So theehi.org. And just give us a look. I'm going to say the last thing to say is that we're very adaptable. We customize interventions and programs and processes for families. We partner with other organizations to get that done. Like we're a very adaptable. We meet
Yeah.
families where they are. We adjust budgets. We come or go wherever we need to meet with the family. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, they wouldn't do this. And like, actually we would. We're able to be as versatile as a wilderness program is. So we adapt to what and where we're needed.
Yeah. Robert, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for sharing your story and doing what you're doing. You got
Yeah,
a great thing going, and we wish you all the best. And
yeah,
thanks for coming on.
no problem. Have a great day.
You too.